They mocked the security guard, until he bought the whole building. There are stories that rise quietly from the corners of forgotten hallways, from the quiet footsteps of those no one noticed, until one day, the world can no longer look away. This was one such story, the story of a man named Samuel, who once wore a faded blue uniform, a cap that barely fit his head, and a name tag that read security. Every morning before dawn, Samuel arrived at the towering glass building, in the heart of the city, a place of endless meetings, polished shoes, and people too busy to look him in the eye. He greeted each employee with a nod and a kind smile, though most barely noticed him. To them, he was invisible, just another part of the building's background, like the elevator's ding or the hum of the air conditioning. Samuel's shoes had lost their shine years ago. His jacket was worn at the elbows, and yet his posture never bent, even as laughter echoed from those who mocked his simplicity. He stood tall. They joked about his old thermos, his cheap watch, the way he packed leftover rice and beans for lunch. But Samuel never replied. He simply smiled, offered them a respectful nod, and continued his rounds, every corner checked, every door secured, every light turned off at night. They didn't know that as he made his nightly rounds, he was also making plans. In the silence of empty offices while others rested, Samuel studied. He borrowed old business magazines from the lobby, reading them under the dim light of the reception desk. He watched YouTube tutorials on real estate, investing, and financial literacy during his lunch breaks. Every word, every chart, every lesson, he absorbed them with the hunger of a man who refused to stay where life had placed him. He had once dreamed of being more. But life, with its cruel humor, had forced him to take whatever job he could after his father fell sick. The security job was supposed to be temporary, just a few months until things got better, but the months had turned into years. Still, Samuel never complained. Instead, he saved. Every spare dollar, every overtime hour, every coin left over after paying bills, all carefully recorded in a small weathered notebook he kept in his locker. Years passed. The employees he guarded came and went, new faces, new promotions, new cars. They laughed louder, dressed sharper, and lived faster. But Samuel noticed patterns. He noticed when people got fired after the company's performance dropped. He noticed which businesses moved in and out of the building. He learned about market cycles, property values, and the hidden opportunities that no one else cared to see. It started small. Samuel bought his first piece of land, a small, neglected lot outside the city. He spent weekends clearing it himself, planting vegetables and renting small plots to local vendors. The money he earned didn't make headlines, but it was steady. He reinvested it, buying another piece, then another. Every morning he still came to work as the building's humble security guard. But inside, something was shifting. He began to see the world differently. He no longer looked at the building as a place of limitation, but as a lesson, a symbol, a mirror of the life he was building outside its walls. Then came the turning point. The building's owner, a wealthy businessman named Richard, decided to sell. The company's profits had fallen, and they were relocating to another district. Rumors spread like wildfire among the employees. Some worried about losing their jobs. Others mocked Samuel even more. "Guess you'll need to find another lobby to guard," one of them joked as they passed by him at the entrance. Samuel only nodded and smiled, his mind already working in silence. When the "for sale" sign went up, he saw not a loss, but an opening. Years of discipline had paid off. Through smart investments, property flips, and unwavering focus, Samuel had quietly built a small fortune. He had business partners now, people who respected his quiet wisdom, his eye for value, and his honesty. And when the opportunity came to bid for the very building he once patrolled, he did not hesitate. The negotiations took months. No one at the company even suspected. They had all moved on, assuming the buyer was another nameless corporation. But on a crisp Monday morning, when the sale was finalized and the paperwork was signed, Samuel returned to the building, not in uniform, but in a tailored gray suit. He stood in the same lobby he had guarded for over a decade, looking up at the shining glass panels that once seemed unreachable. His reflection stared back, no longer the tired watchman, but the owner. The staff who remained couldn't believe it. The man they used to pass by without a glance was now their employer. The same hands that once opened doors for them now held the keys to the entire building. Some were speechless, others embarrassed, but Samuel carried no resentment. He simply smiled, just as he always had, and quietly got to work transforming the place into something greater. He renovated the lobby, improved working conditions, and even established a small scholarship fund for employees' children, named after his late father, the man who had taught him humility, patience, and the value of quiet perseverance. The city soon learned of the story. Local news stations featured him. Headlines called him the guard who bought the building. But Samuel didn't chase fame. He preferred the same quiet mornings, arriving early to check the lights, the doors, the hallways, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He remembered every night he had spent alone in those halls dreaming of something more. And now that he had achieved it, he carried the same discipline, the same respect for every person who walked through his doors. His story became a lesson, whispered among employees, repeated in boardrooms, shared across social media. That dignity in small beginnings is the seed of greatness. People who once laughed at him now quoted his words. Young interns approached him for advice, but Samuel always told them the same thing. Success isn't built in the sunlight where everyone can see you. It's built in the shadows, in the unseen hours, in the choices no one celebrates. There were moments when he stood in the elevator, the same one he used to guard, and remembered all the years of laughter, rejection, and invisible endurance. The scars of humility, he realized, were the foundation of his strength. But, even as he enjoyed success, Samuel knew this was not the end of his journey. He began investing in other small businesses, especially those started by janitors, clerks, and security guards like him. He wanted to create a network of hope, a reminder that no role is insignificant if carried with pride and purpose. In the evenings, when the city lights reflected against the building's windows, he often stood by his office window, watching the people below. Tired workers rushing home, dreamers lost in thought, souls waiting for their moment to rise. He saw himself in all of them. And in that stillness, Samuel often smiled, knowing that his story was no longer just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever been underestimated, mocked, or ignored. Everyone who believed that faith and effort could rewrite destiny. Because in the end, Samuel didn't just buy a building. He bought back his dignity, his dreams, and his purpose. He had proven that the value of a person isn't measured by their uniform, but by the fire that burns quietly behind it. The city eventually came to know his name. But those who truly understood his story never forgot the man he was before the success, the man who stood guard not only over doors and hallways, but over his own dreams. And as time passed, Samuel began a new mission, to teach others, how to see opportunities where others saw walls, how to hold faith when life offered none, and how to rise not with arrogance, but with gratitude. The building that once symbolized his limits had become the beacon of his transformation. And somewhere within its quiet halls, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, a new generation began to dream, because they had seen what was possible. For the man they once mocked had shown them that true strength isn't in how loudly you rise, but in how silently you endure, until one day, the world finally has no choice but to notice. And so, as another sunrise painted the city gold, Samuel adjusted his suit, looked up at his building one more time and smiled, ready for the next chapter of his journey to begin.